Hey everybody, this is Andy, aka Love Retro BTW, across Twitter, Instagram, and Twitch. I do a podcast every Saturday called Cafe BTW, a morning gaming podcast, a retrospective look at the wonderful world of retro gaming, from interviews to guests. Join us every Saturday, like a Saturday morning cartoon, starting at 8 a.m., 11 a.m. Eastern. Also, if you're on Twitter, please join the brand new retro gaming community, a place to share, connect, and show your love for the retro gaming community. All the links are down below. And remember, enjoy the Gamers Week podcast.
Coming up on Gamers Week podcast.
I swear to God, if there's cup noodles in this game, I will take the disc out and snap it over my knee. I don't care.
Can you do me a favor before you do that?
What? Turn on a camera?
Yeah, set your camera up and just hit record. That's all I require.
If the white hot rage allows me to think, I'll try, but probably I'll just be too pissed off.
No, you just let Mr. Blue know that if all of a sudden you reach for the console.
He's got to scramble for his phone. Yeah.
Yep.
There's a box of donuts downstairs that won't stop screaming my name.
Oh,
and it's killing me.
Bad. What kind of donuts are there?
Crappy donuts, like off the shelf in a store brand ones.
Right, but like, are we talking about, like, was there a bakery there? Did you get like an eclair, Long John, a cinnamon roll?
No, it's just like a box of round donuts with crappy frosting on it. It's
okay.
Yeah.
And yet it's calling your name.
And yet it is. I don't know why. If I eat them, I won't enjoy them, but
calling your name. All right, let's get this bad boy started. Two tigers taking turns tasting tapioca. Two tigers tasting turns. Welcome to Gamers Week podcast. Like the name says, we analyze the best, worst, and weirdest headlines of the past week in the video game industry. This is episode 20. Today is Wednesday, May the 4th. May the 4th be with you.
And also with you.
Yep, I knew you were going to say that.
My name is Donnie G Retro, and with me tonight, we have two hosts, two gracious hosts. You all know them. One of them reverts to her handhelds when the power goes out.
Oh, God.
And the other one once married his Super Nintendo because he loved it way too much. My hosts, Ryan and Blue. How you guys doing tonight?
I think I'm going to get in trouble because I'm double married. You can't get double married, Dewey.
I think there's certain pockets of Utah where that's legal.
Right. So hopefully you did it in Utah.
Void where prohibited.
So last weekend at the Midwest Gaming Classic was amazeballs. I was there. I got to see so many people that I call friends, and we got to do something we love, which is collect and talk about video games. If you'd like to hear about the antics that went on at MGC, maybe consider subscribing to our Patreon, where you can unlock our uncut episodes and hear all of the joyous action that went down. So let's move on to our reviews, reactions, and requests for the week. Chrysolite Stone said, Professor Rybread coming in clutch with a Mr. Horse quote and walk-in impression. Care to follow that up?
No, I'm just here to please. That's all I'll say.
Unaleska Games says, thank you for this podcast. It was cool that I was mentioned because of the 12K Terra statue. Geek With That says, I love the community you've built, are building. So many creators' communities are the worst, but you have cultivated a great community that is somehow both positive, but yet also isn't positive vibes only, bro. People that are also the worst, too. It's a healthy balance.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'm really proud of our little group. They're so fun to hang out with. we do our movie nights. We chat every day on Discord, and they're there to pick each other up, pick us up, whoever's having a bad day. And it's really great. I've really come to appreciate them the last few months.
Absolutely.
So
we should have a Gamers Week podcast convention and invite everybody there?
That would be fun, actually.
Where are we going to do it, man?
What's in the middle between all three of us?
Well, and if we're inviting everybody, it wouldn't just be all of us. So it would just be whoever's in the middle of the country.
Kansas it is.
Which is not too far away from me.
So party at Donnie's house is what he's saying.
All right, come on over.
Come on over.
I'll fire up the grill.
And now it's time for the Arrive Importante All Pay.
Ooh, a little bit of gibberish, huh?
I am multilingual. It's Pig Latin. Every Monday on Twitter, we post our VIP, that is our very important poll. And if you'd like to participate, follow us on Twitter at GamersWeekPC. So the question this week was, what is your favorite video game clown? Our answers were, in third place, Pint-Sized Slasher from Fallout, with only 3.7% of the vote. Needles Cane from Twisted Metal got 18.3% of the vote, and the winner was Kefka Palazzo from Final Fantasy VI, with 45.9% of the vote. We also had 32.1% of people vote other, so let's look at some of the comments from the poll.
Hang on a second. Can I just interject really quick?
Yeah, we need a recount on this poll.
Well, not only that, but also I want to change that to Final Fantasy III, please.
Oh, I see what you did there.
We live in America. It's Final Fantasy III.
So I think that the poll needs a recount because like half the answers were people going, I can't believe you didn't put Sweet Tooth in the answers. And I think what people don't realize is that Sweet Tooth is Needles Cane from Twisted Metal.
Right.
Needles Cane is the clown. Sweet Tooth is the truck. So I think Sweet Tooth actually did get the most votes. It was just that people don't know his real name.
I was in that camp because I was like, what? No, no Sweet Tooth?
You guys are killing me.
At least I didn't tweet about it first. I let people respond and they went, oh, that's something I learned today.
A schooner is a sailboat, stupid head.
Okay, some of the comments from the poll at G-Swap Project said Pietro from Animal Crossing franchise. At NY Nux said Adam the Clown from Dead Rising. He gives you the strongest weapon in the game that has near infinite durability with the right magazines/books and kills bosses and special forces in 2 hits. 0000 Jordan says Kinky Pinky from Narc. At Dark Blue Monkey says Chuckles the Jester. Dude knows how to tell a joke. And at Memento Mori says Activision Blizzard CEO Bobby Kotick. Applause.
He's not wrong.
Yes.
No, he's making some very good points here.
Get some burn ointment for Bobby.
Ooh, it's burned so good.
So how did you vote, Ryan?
So I'm torn between two of them. So Kefka, of course, because I can't think of a more badass villain for a Final Fantasy game than Kefka. I know that there are people going to rage by me saying that, but I'm also a huge Twisted Metal fan. Well, I say huge, but really it's Twisted Metal 1 and 2, and that's about it. But nonetheless, I've always loved Sweet Tooth. Found out his actual name today or the other day. I'm struggling with this one, but gun to my head, I'm going to go with Needles Cane.
Really? That surprises me. I had you down as a Kefka person.
And, Kefka's great. It's just, I don't know. I guess technically being a clown, he can be a little bit over the top, but I don't know. There's something about like the psychotic nature of Needles Cane that is it more interesting to me. Mm-hmm.
What did you vote, Donnie?
I think I voted Needles Cane, Twisted Metal, but honorable mention. What about Mad Clown from Super Punch-Out?
Ooh, good one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's big. He's wearing overalls. He juggles while he's in the ring. How could you not love this guy?
And where's the ref when he starts throwing balls at you?
How is that allowed? That Super Punch Out really irked me as a kid, and even still irks me as an adult, where people, like, when I got kicked for the first time, I'm like, whoa, what are you talking about? Like, this isn't, like, you look at Mike Tyson's Punch Out, and it's all punches. And now Super Punch Out just completely takes the steroids, takes the andro, everything, and just cranks it up past 11 and says, we're going to kick you. We're going to throw balls at your face. An old guy's going to hit you with a stick.
That was my favorite because it's not like he's hiding it, you know? He just walks in with this huge stick and they're like, yep, I'm going to use it.
What are you going to do about it? Nothing.
Right.
You're going to sit there and take it. What about you, Blue? Which one was your choice?
Well, I also voted Needles Cane. So we have a clean sweep here.
Nice.
Twisted Metal is a lot of fun. And really, I just think that the one that sticks out in my mind is the cover of Twisted Metal Black. Anytime you just saw Needles Cane's face, it just was so iconic and so representative of that franchise that when you think of video game clowns, that's immediately where my mind goes.
Absolutely.
For sure.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't he the face of Twisted Metal?
Basically.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. Super iconic.
All right, why don't we go ahead and shout out our patrons? We couldn't do what we do without the help of our gorgeous patrons. Here are the generous folks supporting Gamers Week on Patreon. Big breath. Princess Kitty Mew Mew, Rai Rai's secret best friend, Mega Retro Man, Game of Droid, Emo S, Bill Tucker, Rybread's #1 fan, Fruitcate's #1 stan, the Wizard of Zardoz, Clayman 71, Great Saiyaman 81, BNT Zilla Guy, Geek With That, Crunchy Kong, Sheriff Snacks, Frank Grande, Love Retro BTW, Steven Sand, Terry Kinnair, Ducks in Disguise, Jim and Colleen, Games with Coffee, Davey PGH, the Red Ox PDX family, including Shannon and Luke, Zach Huge Thanks, and Random Retro Dude. So if you like what you hear today, and we really hope you do, please consider joining us on Patreon. Your support helps cover the cost of producing the show, as well as other cool stuff we'll be doing like prizes and giveaways. You'll also gain access to our weekly patron-only bonus cast called Gamers Week Uncut, Patrons with Benefits. Visit patreon.com/gamersweek or follow the link in the show notes to learn more.
All right, let's hop on our one wheels and head on over to the headlines of the week. Our headline segment is proudly sponsored by the Retro Game Club podcast. It's a fantastic family-friendly retro gaming podcast. In each episode, Rob and Hugh pick 2 games to play and discuss, as well as news, interviews, and other topics. Currently, they're working through The Secret of Monkey Island and NES Open Tournament Golf, which is a great game. Visit them at retrogameclub.net or follow the link in the show notes.
I got to say, both of these games are fantastic. Secret of Monkey Island and NES Open.
Secret of Monkey Island is a fun game, no doubt, but it's very, very niche in the puzzle solving.
Sure.
Like,
I'll give you that.
I sat there and just like, if I remember correctly, it was like hours trying to find my way through something like, oh, how would the average person know that Hippocac would be used to make something throw up?
You didn't know that?
I did, but you've got people that probably don't know what that term is or what that stuff even is. So how would you know that that's got to make something else throw up?
It's a lot of fun at parties, though.
Right?
That's why we're not having the party at Ryan's house.
Here, have some punch.
No, thank you. All right, first up from Yahoo, Sony will reportedly handle creating PlayStation Plus game demos itself. Earlier this week, it was reported that Sony had requested that developers create time-limited demos for its revamped PlayStation Plus service. Launching on June 13, the Game Pass alternative will already offer top-tier subscribers more than 700 titles, but it seems that Sony wanted to entice new subscribers with longer, exclusive demos. Per this policy, Sony asked developers to release free demos for games that cost over $34. Now it appears that Sony will shoulder the work of creating the demos, utilizing its own PlayStation Store team, according to an update from Kotaku's Ethan Gach. Source tells me PlayStation Store team will create the 2-hour time trials for developers, so it shouldn't be extra work, though I've heard concerns from others about Sony monetizing a perk and not sharing that revenue with studios. Gawk wrote in a tweet. As Gawk said, the reported shift in Sony's policy may make things easier for developers, but raises the question of whether or not studios would receive revenue from the demos.
This was an F it, we'll do it ourselves.
Right.
I mean, kind of. I saw some discussion on Twitter where people were thinking that it was weird that PlayStation would be delving into the code of other games to create demos, and then somebody else said, no, they'll probably just put a timer on it. This really doesn't explain how they're going to do it, but it is a little bit weird.
So what this says to me is that they probably got a whole bunch of backlash from studios saying, I can't create a demo. I don't know what you're talking about, blah, 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 blah. It's going to cost me X amount of dollars to do this, and we're not going to use your service potentially as a result of that. This is what it sounds like to me. Now, of course, that's speculation, but for them to come out so quickly and kind of backpedal, it sings to me of backlash that they must have received.
Yeah, it really does, because when we spoke about this topic last week, it was Sony saying you have to put out the demo within 3 months of your release and it has to be up for a whole year. So those aren't the kind of things you say if you're going to do it yourself.
Right.
And now you've got Sony stepping in and saying, okay, we'll help you out. We'll do this. So it'll take the brunt of the work off your shoulders. You don't have to worry about it. But now they're like, wait a second. What about our money from these downloads? It's like, really? You're sitting here complaining that you couldn't do this work. We're offering you assistance, but you want your cake and you want to eat it too.
That is a weird complaint because they're free demos.
Right. So what revenue are we talking about here? Does Sony, in fact, get a little bit of revenue for a download?
The only thing I could think of is if they think that more people will sign up for the highest tier because of the demos.
That's a good point. Yeah.
But that's about the only logic I can see in it.
I, for one, like demos because it gives me the opportunity to play the game before I go shell out the money. Now, granted, these companies probably like, well, no, just give me your money anyway. You can play the game after you bought it. Well, that's really going to sour these people on any future releases you might have. So I think the game demo is in everybody's best interest. It probably, if your game sucks, then people are going to know that.
You know what, though? I think one of the things that it does, so demos that I've played in the past sometimes skip around the story to provide you with exciting elements to it. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of games that I've played that are slow burns, right? Where the fun stuff doesn't happen for a while.
Right.
And so the question is this going to influence studios to change their style of play or story elements and all that kind of thing to seem much more exciting up front? Is that a bad thing? I don't know, but it certainly does change the narrative of how you put together a game.
I wouldn't think it would change how people design their games. Like a lot of RPGs, people are like, oh, it doesn't get good till 10 hours into the game.
Right.
I don't think that's going to change just because Sony insists on free demos, but it does make a good point. If Sony's just going to say, here's 2 hours at the beginning of the game, go.
Right.
That's not necessarily going to be a good showing for every video game. Do they get just tell Sony, no, we want our 2 hours to be in the middle of the game. We want it to be here. We want it to include maybe some of the middle and some that's a bit later. It's almost like, you know what? Never mind. We will do it ourselves.
Well, I think that makes sense, though. If the game studio can actually pick like what exciting action in the game that they want the consumer to actually get their hands on, and maybe that'll entice them a little bit more to pick up their product, I think that's a win. But something like the Final Fantasy VII remake, okay? I think the initial game, you got to play the first 2 hours of the game or the first hour or 30 minutes or something like that, because I know it was timed.
That first,
right?
I don't think it was timed. I think it was just through that first boss fight, the Scorpion
the first
boss.
mission.
Yep. Okay. So you got to experience that, the remake, the revamp from the 1997 classic. And I think that was good because everybody knows that game. It's very popular. And to see the renovations made in the game, I think that sold it. But if you can pick and choose what spot in your game that's going to make the consumer just jump out of their seat, I think it would behoove you to do that.
And again, if it's just a blanket 2 hours, though, is there going to be certain parts of the game that might be spoilers as well? That might be an interesting thing.
Yeah, you make a good point.
And again, this is, of course, if just Sony just goes stamp 2 hours, stamp 2 hours, stamp 2 hours. So I think you would be right in that sense that if you get to pick and choose the sections of the game, that would be ideal.
Now, if you have a game that it's got tutorials in the beginning, whatnot, I think it would be smart to release that first 2 hours.
2 hours of tutorials?
Well, no. You know what I mean.
Really, I think the more we talk about it, the more it almost seems like the developers should just do it themselves because they know their game best. And Sony's just going to, everybody gets 2 hours at the beginning and there.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I guess we will.
All right, next up from gamesindustry.biz, Nintendo contractors criticize company culture and treatment. Contractors for Nintendo of America have described a growing sense of discontent due to the disparity between how the company treats themselves and its full-time workers, according to an IGN report in which the outlet spoke with a dozen current and former employee sources. The company itself reported a turnover of 4.7% as of last year, as full-time employees commonly stay for years or even decades. However, sources said contractors commonly exit the company in under a year. One source said a death in the family forced her to return home partway through an interview process for a full-time position, which led to the interviewer telling her she had attendance issues, in quotations.
Jeez.
Now, with regards to growing discontent, sources also said that part-timer restrictions to company events, activities, and even attendance policies have led to them feeling like second-class citizens. The report also includes comments from former Nintendo of America president Reggie Fils-Aimé. I've read the same stories, this division between contract and full employees. All I can say is that it's not at all the culture that I left as I retired from Nintendo. Yikes, Fils-Aimé said. The IGN report follows 2 weeks after a similar report from Kotaku, which alleged that Mario Maker maintained cyclical contract work for low wages, expected overtime, and a lack of benefits.
This is nothing new. This is something that companies do with contractors. I used to be a contractor myself at a company I'd worked for, and it kind of hurt and stung where you saw the full-time employees getting to partake in company activities that the contractors didn't get to. I remember specifically they would take full-time employees. They would give them like one day. They'd say, okay, you can be done at noon. And, oh, by the way, we're having this party out at Dave & Buster's for you guys. Oh, contractors, sorry, you're not invited. And you're like, I'm doing the same work as these guys, yet I don't get to partake in any. I mean, that seems shitty to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's basically the life I live. Being a freelance writer, you're just a contract worker. People can't wait to hire you and then overwork you and then get rid of you as fast as they can. And it sucks. It's just so much easier, so much cheaper for companies to not have to hire people.
And I mean, they've been doing contract work for major company. I mean, if you look at WWE, right, all the wrestlers that work for them are technically contract workers. They don't have benefits. They don't get vacation time. They basically have to be available at any moment that an event is going on. And that as far as being injured, they can be removed and fired as a result of injury, which a full-time employee absolutely could not do because there's legislation around that, right? Where if somebody is full-time, they have a certain amount of rights that are available to them. And if you look at like the economy of the now, I think it's like 35%, somewhere around there are of the workforce in America is part of what's known as the gig economy, which means that they are pretty much purely contract workers. And that's an interesting thing to go to because, I mean, when my parents were in the workforce, I would imagine that number was in the single digits for the most part. And now what I think you kind of pointed that out, Donnie, is that it's easier for them to hire people temporarily for different job functions and then be able to cast them away because they don't have to pay them as much. They don't have to pay for benefits that go along with it. But if you have work that you need to do, shouldn't you be willing to pay for people to have a living wage while doing those things? If you can't conduct business without being able to pay your workers living wage and provide them with benefits, maybe you can't afford to do that kind of business is, I guess, what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, now you're going down a slippery slope of talking about all these businesses across America or really anywhere paying their employees a living wage. We know that the fast food industry was plagued by that, where people used to think that, working in a fast food restaurant, like, that's not a real job, when it actually could be somebody's career. Mm-hmm. You should, hands down, pay your employees a living wage. But most of these companies, all of the CEOs, they want, I want all this money for myself, and I'll let these guys do all the brunt work and make me millions and millions and continue to make me millions. And, look, I'm going to pay them peanuts and they'll still continue to work. So where's
I mean, it's all benefit for the company to use contract workers instead of employees. It's all benefit and no downside. And then for the contract workers, they say, well, we'll start you out as contract and then we'll give preference to you when full-time jobs become open. And that's how, they entice you to still work for them. But that's not how it works out.
Right. And that position never becomes available.
Right. And this has been going on long enough that as much as we all like Reggie, I seriously doubt when he says, that's not the culture that I left.
Right.
Are you sure, Reg?
I don't recall it this time.
Yeah. Does kind of have that vibe to it.
Right.
I guess if you're going to have contract employees, at least then fight them to be a part of things, though. I mean, at the very least.
At the very least, I would say yes. So whenever I was a contractor, I couldn't even talk to my manager about work performance or anything like that. He would have to report to my contracting company. And if there was ever an issue, they would come to me and let me know. So that kind of sucked. That did make you feel alienated from the rest of the workforce that you were participating in.
So I guess Gordon Gekko was wrong. Greed is not good.
Depends on who it's good or not good for.
Yeah, it depends on who's saying it, I guess.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, next up from IGN, Sonic Prime, Netflix shows a glimpse of the new animated series. A brief new animated teaser and several images have been unveiled by Netflix, giving us a glimpse at the new Sonic the Hedgehog show, as well as several other upcoming animated projects, including a new Kung Fu Panda series. Sonic Prime follows the legendary blue hedgehog on a high-octane adventure where the fate of a strange new multiverse rests in his gloved hands. That may sound like an altogether familiar premise, but it's said that Sonic Prime is more than just a race to save the universe, with Netflix explaining that Sonic will find himself on a journey of self-discovery and redemption. It's his truth. It's his journey. At the moment, details about Sonic Prime are scarce, but the show will feature 24 full episodes. Although the images don't show us much, it looks as though Sonic is up to his usual antics, chasing gold rings and, running really fast. Although this new announcement from Netflix Kids and Family looks fairly promising, it comes just weeks after the online streamer slashed its animation projects following massive subscriber drops. Whether or not these new kids shows will avoid cancellation remains to be seen.
Yeah, Sonic fans, I wouldn't get attached to this show if I were you. It'll be lucky to get past its second season, the way Netflix operates.
Well, I guess it all depends on how much work they put into the show, right? Are they just pumping something out because of the popularity of Sonic right now? Or
Probably.
Did they really take the time to invest some deep thought into Sonic, into the show itself? And if all the fans come and watch it and say, oh, yeah, this is great. Oh, it's so amazing. I would think you'd want to keep people happy and possibly get some of your subscriber count back and keep the show running.
I mean, you'd think so, but Netflix operates in such a strange way where they put out new content all the time. They rarely promote it ever. So you're counting on audiences to find these shows, I guess, by accident or something. Because there's actually a lot of really good original anime and stuff like that on Netflix, but like I said, don't ever get attached to them because they're probably just going to fade into obscurity and nobody will ever think of them again. Sonic has a chance to be maybe something more like the Castlevania series, which got really popular and was able to do a full run of 4 seasons. So Sonic has that same name recognition, fingers crossed. But Netflix does not operate as if animated shows are any sort of priority for the company. They're basically a second thought if they're thought of at all.
And I think to your point, the fact that it's a Sonic cartoon is more likely to draw folks in, so that it's more likely that they will keep it. I do like the idea, though, that it's not just going to be the old school Sonic cartoon, where it's like chili dogs and pingas and stuff like that. It sounds like this is going to be a little bit more in depth and thought provoking, with a journey of self-discovery and redemption. He's the Thelma and Louise him and Tails.
I don't know, that's pretty deep for Sonic.
But yeah, I would love to see that. So fingers crossed that it does have enough name recognition to stick around, for sure.
And enough subscribers left on Netflix to make it worth it.
Details.
I'm still subscribing.
I am as well,
Yeah.
but only because I want the next season of The Witcher.
There you go. She needs to see Henry.
I do.
Right. Don't we all?
All right, next up from Nintendo Live, Reggie had to fight for Wii Sports as a pack-in, and Miyamoto wasn't happy. Nintendo has a history of bundling games with hardware going back to the NES and Game Boy era. It's never been a fixed policy, nor one that's always matched between regions. Take Wii Sports as an example. Those copies that were bundled in with Wii systems count towards software sales, so it's the, quote, best-selling Wii game at 82.9 million copies against 101.63 million Wii systems sold. There's little doubt it was vital to the early appeal of the console, yet getting the title bundled was evidently the result of multiple challenging meetings internally, as Reggie Fils-Aimé outlines in his new book. Fils-Aimé pushed for the bundle, and initially, company president Satoru Iwata turned the proposal down. Nintendo does not give away precious content for free, Iwata said. In a meeting, Miyamoto-san presented an early version of Wii Play as an alternative, though Fils-Aimé countered to say that it didn't feel like a complete experience compared to Wii Sports. Having Wii Play turned down was apparently a rare occasion of Miyamoto-san being visibly unhappy. A key message at the heart of Fils-Aimé's book, however, is that disagreements were respectful within Nintendo, and they were rare when compared with compromises and shared ideas. Particularly in his relationship with Iwata-san, he maintains that challenging conversations around strategy were handled the right way, and it is clear that there was a bond between the two executives.
And the crazy part is I think that game is what sold the system for a lot of non-gamers. So at the end of the day, that really, really worked out. And Reggie was in the right. He nailed it.
Can you imagine like an alternate reality where Wii Sports was not bundled? And what would they try to use to sell the Wii?
Probably a Mario game.
Probably. I mean, that would make the next most sense based on what they've done previously, but I can't imagine it catching on like it did without Wii Sports.
Because didn't the Wii U, they had Super Mario, or what was the launch title Mario game for the Wii U?
Wasn't it Mario 3D World?
Yeah, Super Mario 3D World. So in retrospect, you pretty much have a Mario game for every single launch of every single Nintendo system, if I'm not mistaken.
I think the Game Boy launched with Tetris.
Well, the Super Mario Land was technically a launch title, but it was bundled with Tetris. So there is that distinction there.
Got it.
And people would look at that, the entire timeline of Nintendo, and say, oh, they bundled a Mario game, every single console. Okay. Oh, what's this Wii Sports? Okay. It's something different. It's something unique. It gets everybody involved. I mean, even my mother and father-in-law, who don't play games at all, they loved Wii Sports, and they got to play that with their grandchildren. Got to play it with us, with Wii Golf. I think it was a no-brainer.
Yeah, and you read those stories sometimes about the Wii still being in use to this day in places like retirement homes.
Yep.
Where the residents there, the elderly residents, still love to play their bowling and all that kind of stuff. So
let's go down to the rec room so I can throw some balls around.
As a recent purchaser of Switch Sports, though, I got to say, not a whole lot of time can be spent on Wii Sports. As an older gentleman myself, I am so sore from playing Switch Sports right now.
That's because you decided to play it 4 hours in one day. If you do anything for 4 hours in one day, you're going to be sore.
That's true.
Do you do any other exercising?
No, then
There's your problem.
there's your problem right there.
Yep.
All right.
All right, so why don't we jump into our top 3 new releases? First up is Loot River. Platform is Xbox Series X and S, Xbox One, and PC. Explore procedurally generated labyrinths in a dungeon-crawling action roguelike that combines tense real-time combat with spatial block shifting. Slide blocks of ancient ruins, fight bestial abominations, loot, explore, level up, strategize, cast powerful spells, die, and wake anew. Whoever wrote that did not read it out loud, because that was a lot.
That's always the fun part about doing these, is because none of these articles are written for audio.
Just like so many words after words after words.
Right?
It's like a Tolkien chapter. All right, next is Trek to Yomi, which platform is PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PS4, Xbox One, and PC. As a vow to his dying master, the young swordman Hiroki is sworn to protect his town and the people he loves against all threats. Faced with tragedy and bound to duty, the lone samurai must voyage beyond life and death to confront himself and decide his path forward. And lastly, Among Us Ejected Edition. Platform is PS5, Xbox Series X and S, PS4, Xbox One, Switch. Includes Among Us base game and all the DLC items, plus limited edition steelbook, imposter syndrome sticker sheet, one of 12 special Mira HQ holograph access cards, folded map poster, and more. So take a look at these 3 games. Which ones are you guys excited for most?
I'm all in for Trek to Yomi, which we've talked about before on the show. It looks so good, like if Kurosawa decided to make a samurai game.
That's the one. I thought this looked familiar.
Yeah, this is the black and white one, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I heard some early things that it wasn't actually that good, some early reviews, but I didn't read them. That's just kind of the word that I saw floating around the internet. So I don't know, but I'm still most interested in that one.
Donnie, what about you?
Definitely that one, because like as you said, we talked about it before. It looks beautiful. I'm also interested in Loot River. It looks kind of up my alley. It's got this like kind of retro synthwave Outrun feel to it.
If Outrun was a dungeon crawler, you mean?
Exactly. Just the color palette scheme that's used. It to me, it looks interesting. I think I'm going to check that one out.
Cool.
Brian, what about you?
Trek to Yomi is definitely right up my alley. Like Blue had kind of described, I'm a huge fan of Kurosawa films anyway, so to be able to essentially play one of those is totally 100% up my alley. Among Us, do I need more Among Us? I don't think so.
It's a little bit weird because this ejected edition is like $90. It's a big thing.
Is it really?
Ooh, damn.
Seriously, this is probably only half of all the goodies that's offered in the box. But it still seems weird to pay $90 for a free game.
Somebody's going to do it.
I noticed it wasn't on PC either, and that's how I play Among Us, so I guess I'm SOL. But Loot River sounds cool. If I can get past all of the incredible adjectives used to describe it. But yeah, I think Trek to Yomi would be one that I'd pick up right away.
So Among Us Ejected Edition, looks like you're the odd man out.
You're sus.
I know, you've been ejected.
You're sus. There you go.
All right. So before we jump into the main topic, to celebrate Star Wars Week, Gamers Week is giving away a brand new copy of Lego Star Wars: The Skywalker Saga for Nintendo Switch. So in order to enter, look for Retro Game Brew's pinned tweet on Twitter on Friday morning and comment with a picture or a screenshot of you listening to episode 20. Now, entries will be accepted from May 7th to May 10th. And if you're already listening to the episode, like you are, so you might as well enter in now before you forget. By the way, this month's game is being provided by our newest sponsor, JNL Games. Visit jnlgames.com, where all pre-sales are always discounted off MSRP, $10 off $60 titles, and $5 off anything below $40. I personally picked up Nintendo Switch Sports, as I just said, for $10 off, and I could not be happier with my purchase, so definitely check them out today. Link is in the show notes.
So our main topic this week, Square Enix has been making major headlines this week, and it's not because the pixel remasters of Final Fantasy 1 through 6 are finally coming to consoles. Here's a roundup of Square Enix news. From CNBC, Tomb Raider publisher sells iconic video game franchise to invest in blockchain. What? Oh, bad move. The iconic Tomb Raider video game franchise is being sold by its Japanese publisher Square Enix as part of a $300 million deal. Square Enix said Monday it will offload 3 of its game development studios, Eidos Interactive, Crystal Dynamics, and Square Enix Montreal, to Swedish firm Embracer Group. Embracer will also acquire the intellectual property for Tomb Raider and 3 other game series, including Deus Ex, Thief, and Legacy of Kain. Square Enix said it is selling the assets to cut down on costs amid a challenging global business environment, while also investing in new technologies like the blockchain. The company's commitment to ramp up spending in blockchain, the technology behind many cryptocurrencies and non-fungible tokens, there's that term again, led to some backlash on social media. One user said the move was like selling your house for magic beans. Square Enix has been seeking to offload this part of its business to restructure and focus its investments, Piers Harding-Rolls, head of games research at Ampere Analysis, told CNBC. It has struggled to get consistent commercial success out of those studios, and it wants to build a leaner organization with a more compelling growth and profit story for its shareholders. Square Enix said it will continue to publish titles from other international franchises, including Just Cause, Outriders, and Life is Strange.
So remember last week when we talked about the $11,600 statue? And we said that Square Enix has changed so much from the developer we used to know and love that they're hardly recognizable.
I do remember that.
Yeah. This just seems to hammer that point home really hard.
I mean, I remember Tomb Raider not so much as a Square Enix property, but as Eidos Interactive. I mean, that's obviously the developer studio that created it. Tomb Raider 1, 2, 3. Eidos and Crystal Dynamics are how I remember Tomb Raider. So I don't really care that Square Enix is selling them off. Maybe if another studio can pick them up and do something great with them, sure, absolutely.
The one thing I will say, I think there's a misconception when people say blockchain, they automatically think cryptocurrency and NFTs.
It's more than that.
Oh, it is 100% more than that. And a lot of it has to do with their supply chain and how they distribute things. So, and I'm playing devil's advocate here. This actually might be a good move for them to kind of get into the 21st century, more or less, because there are so many other companies who are utilizing this technology. And what it is it's basically a uneditable ledger of information that's encrypted on both ends, right?
Right.
So, for example, Walmart uses it. Say like you had a bunch of we'll say potatoes that they were selling in their market, and come to find out some of them were, had salmonella in them. Blockchain would allow you to do is identify what those are and then remove those out of the supply chain and replace them with others. So while that's probably not terribly relevant to what Square Enix does, but it allows them to communicate with a lot more companies utilizing that technology. Mm-hmm. So I get it. But that there's nothing saying that they're not also investing in cryptocurrency or NFTs.
Well,
so
Square Enix, the president of Square Enix, put out a New Year's letter. And here's what is one of the paragraphs. And lastly is blockchain games. Be they single player or online games, games have traditionally involved a unidirectional flow whereby creators such as ourselves provide a game to the consumers that play them. By contrast, blockchain games, which have emerged from their infancy and are at this very moment entering a growth phase, are built upon the premise of a token economy and therefore hold the potential to enable self-sustaining game growth. The driver that most enables such self-sustaining game growth is diversity, both in how people engage with interactive content like games and in their motivations for doing so. Advances in token economies will likely add further momentum to this trend of diversification. I see the play to earn concept that has people so excited as a prime example of this. And of course, that led to something I think we talked about on the show early is the whole, I realize some people play to have fun thing.
Right.
And he's totally talking about NFTs as well. So.
Yeah, like you can defend them, and to be fair, they did not say they wanted to do NFT and cryptocurrency, but there's a lot of evidence that that is actually what they want to do.
I tried, Square Enix. I tried.
And failed.
So this kind of seems like the kind of thing that happens to where it becomes more important for a company to please its shareholders than anything else.
Right.
It's not about making good games anymore. It's just about how can we continually increase profits, never top out. We must always increase. We must always increase so that we can please the shareholders. And eventually, you can't just do that by making good games anymore. You have to take other methods, such as NFTs and blockchain is what they're trying.
Right. And that's how businesses stay alive, by doing new things and not just,
I thought businesses stayed alive by making products that consumers liked.
That too, but it's all about how you can do that very cost effectively to the business. And that kind of, I guess our whole episode tonight is all about businesses and how greedy they are, and not
this week and last week.
Yeah, I'll say and last week,
which is nothing new. Your only mindset is to make your shareholders happy,
right?
Because they're the ones ultimately that are investing a lot of money for you to be able to go out and do these things. Now you recoup that money by making the game and selling the game and having the consumer pay their money to you, and you can say, "Oh, okay, look at what all this money brought to us. Now we can pay these people. We can kind of reinvest in other things." But it's our shareholders that really front up, I think, a lot of that money.
Right. I mean, you're not wrong, but one thing I will say is if Square Enix stops caring about making games that people want to play, they will die.
Oh, absolutely. That's the crux of it, is if you don't have a viable product, it doesn't matter how much you invest in it.
Right. It doesn't matter how many shareholders you have. Without the games, you have nothing. And it kind of right now seems like that they've forgotten that a little bit.
I have nothing.
Every time it gets too serious, we'll just have Donnie sing something.
I'm down.
I wanted you to finish the line, and you didn't.
If I don't have you.
That was beautiful.
You
didn't have to keep going.
Keep going. No, stop.
Wait, stop. No, stop. Keep going. No, stop.
Okay, next from GamesIndustry.biz, Yuji Naka took Square Enix to court over unfinished Balan Wonderworld. Long-serving development icon Yuji Naka has revealed details of a dispute between himself and Square Enix over the state of Balan Wonderworld. The game launched in March last year to poor reviews, with a Metacritic score as low as 36 on Switch and peaking at 51 on PlayStation 5, and that is out of 100, everyone. 3 months later, it emerged that he had left Square Enix. In a Twitter thread, he today claimed a, quote, business order removed him as the game's director around half a year before launch, and that he filed a lawsuit against Square Enix over the matter. Now that the trial is over and the business order is no longer in effect, he has shared more details. According to Google's translation of the tweets, his removal appears to be around two disputes. One, concerning the use of a YouTuber to play the game music in the marketing, rather than using the original score, and the other over co-developer Arzest submitting the game for release without fixing various issues. He added that games should be made by striving to make it a good game until the end and wanting game fans to enjoy it when they buy it, but commented that the tight schedule was set by Square Enix's producer rather than himself. I think Square Enix and Arzest are companies that don't care about games and game fans, he wrote.
Ooh. Shots fired.
Seriously. Now, to be fair, Yuji Naka has long had a reputation for being difficult to work with. So perhaps this is an issue where the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Right.
He wanted the original score used, but says Square Enix was going to use a YouTuber to play the game music, which sounds weird.
Very weird.
Yeah. And then the co-developer, Arzest, was not going to fix some issues before releasing the game.
That's kind of shitty right there. I mean,
yeah.
Really? You're just going to push it to launch? I mean, Cyberpunk 2077, that just reeks of that.
Right.
You have known issues that we just need to go ahead and cut our losses. Go ahead and put it out. We'll patch it whenever we can. People will buy the game. It's been in development for 10 years. Let's just go ahead and put it out. And you don't care that the entire collective is going to just march at your door with pitchforks and torches and demand their money back, which that's what happened with Cyberpunk, right?
Mm-hmm.
How could you as a company do this?
I think they do it all the time. I think, like, you remember No Man's Sky when it first launched, it was a dumpster fire.
Right.
Most Assassin's Creed games are known for being super buggy when they first come out. I think it's a common thing to release a game that mostly works.
Yeah, but I mean, Square Enix did not have that reputation until recently.
Right. And
they released perfect games almost.
You played the demo for Balan Wonderworld.
Oh, it was so boring.
Didn't make it through your 2 hours?
No, the gameplay itself is just, it's trying to be a little bit of a Mario game. The most recent one with the hats, I forgot the name of it off the top
Super
of my head.
Mario Odyssey.
No, is it?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's Odyssey.
Okay. So Super Mario Odyssey, it's trying to be, and it definitely does not fit the bill, right? It's a fetch quest with all these little items. It's platforming, but the world itself is not interesting. The visuals are not great. And I played the demo of it, and a demo should include some really fun stuff. I mean,
absolutely.
Unless it's now PlayStation's 2 hours.
Right.
And it just, I found myself actually trying to see if I could break the game by jumping on things that I wasn't supposed to. That's where I found the most fun out of that, not just doing the missions.
That's not a big selling point.
Right.
No.
Right.
Come break our game.
Yeah.
Again, though, Square Enix has been known for really high quality stuff. So the fact that they wouldn't be willing to fix a game before it was released talks to me about a huge shift in their mentality. Mm-hmm. And that's disappointing because, I mean, for the longest time, Square Enix, I mean, both of those companies separately and then together were some of the best studios out there.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe that's what it is, right? Like Activision was great. Blizzard was great.
Oh, how the mighty have fallen.
Right. It's you live long enough, you become the villain, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
They're the Harvey Dent.
Well, I will tell you what all this says to me. I'm not buying Final Fantasy 16 at release.
Oh, really?
I am going to wait a few months and see.
Wow. That's huge.
Square Enix has said that Final Fantasy 16 is supposed to be kind of a return to their roots and is supposed to bring back fans that have lapsed. But the things that I'm seeing in the news is not really convincing me of that.
So I guess there's a fear that the new Final Fantasy might have been the same way, where there's a bunch of bugs, maybe a whole litter of advertisements that are in there, and it's just not going to be your cup of tea.
And they're changing out mega elixirs for Mountain 2.
Oh my God.
Flaming hot.
You joke about that now, but...
Like a Hostess cupcake will get you a little bit of health back, or a Tyson chicken full meal will get you like all of your health back.
I swear to God, if there's cup noodles in this game, I will take the disc out and snap it over my knee. I don't care.
Can you do me a favor before you do that?
What? Turn on a camera?
Yeah, set your camera up. Just hit record. That's all I
don't
require.
know, if the white hot rage allows me to think, I'll try, but probably I'll just be too pissed off.
No, you just let Mr. Blue know that if all of a sudden you reach for the console.
He's got to scramble for his phone. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Before we bring in Professor Rybread, let's take a quick break to talk about our sponsor. Gaming History 101 is proudly sponsored by the Elitist Podcast. It's a show where three friends and occasional guests play games about video games, including trivia, game show games, and more. Here is this week's trivia question. Sharing the same production studio and composer, Command & Conquer is widely considered the third part of what licensed video game franchise? Tune into the Elitist Podcast this Wednesday to hear the answer. You can find the Elitist on your favorite podcast platform. We'll also have their links in the show notes. That's a very interesting question.
I know the answer to this, and I can't believe that I know the answer to this.
I mean, you know the answer because Tim already told you?
Well, yes. So when he sends it to me, I guess, and he'll tell me if I'm right or wrong. And I was right, first guess on this one. And it was like, yeah, look at you.
So what is this one?
You'll have to check out the latest podcast to hear. All right, thank you for coming, students. Please take your seats. Welcome to Professor Rybread's Gaming History 101. And in today's lesson, we're going to discuss the early history of console, online gaming, and digital marketplace, which, of course, I didn't know were a thing before I got too old to enjoy them. So starting at the beginning, I got a question for the two of you. If you had to guess, what was the first console that you could download games to?
My first guess would have been the Sega Genesis. That's what I remember.
Yep. Blue, what about you?
Super Famicom, because they had that add-on thing that we talked about.
Yeah, the Satellaview.
Yeah.
You guys are unfortunately about 15 years too late.
What?
Yes. So, believe it or not, in 1980, the Intellivision allowed users to download games directly to their system.
Wow.
Yep, believe it or not. So it was a device called the Play Cable. And basically, gamers got to receive games from their cable TV service.
Man, the 80s were wild, man.
But, you know, the whole process for this is often what we're going to talk about is using the term special cart, because every time we talk about an iteration of it, basically it's something that you had to plug into your system. And the Intellivision was no different, right? So basically you would get that special cart. It would attach the TV cable line into the cartridge itself, and it would send radio or analog signals to the receiver. So you basically would boot up the system, and it would send out the same frequency every time you reset it, which was the menu screen. And that's where you would choose a library of anywhere between 15 to 20 games. Basically, when you chose a game, the receiver would just change the frequency to that specific game. It's almost like changing the channel on your TV. So it allowed you to play that specific game. So there was, of course, you'd have to buy the cartridge. You would obviously have to sign up with a little bit of a service. So there was definitely a cost to it. But in 1983, there was another iteration of that called the Game Line. And it was a dial-up game distribution service for the Atari 2600.
You're blowing my mind.
Right. So again, gamers would take the proprietary cartridge, plug it into their Atari, and it included a storage as well as a modem. And basically, you would download the game temporarily through your phone line, your telephone line. The card itself costs $60, which if you convert that into today's dollars, that's $176.
Wow.
Yeah, a little expensive. But you would pay basically a one-time membership fee of $15 and then $1 per game. Sounds great. The only problem is the game would typically work for anywhere between 5 to 10 plays. And if anybody's ever played an Atari game, that's not very long.
Right.
And then again, you would connect to the game line again and again to get more downloads. And they would charge you $1 every time. Now, the cartridge actually had a modem that was 1.2 kilobits per second. So if you remember, 56K was basically 50 times as fast as this. But considering how small the games were, it only took them anywhere between 10 to 20 seconds to actually download.
Oh, yeah, that's lightning fast.
Yep. Now, the thing is, though, with the service, they didn't have Atari's approval for it. So all the games were third party. Yeah, surprise, right? All the games were third party. So they ended up getting a license with their largest distributor, which was actually iMagic. So a lot of those iMagic games were available, but Mattel, Atari, Parker Brothers, what have you, did not sign up with the service. So the interesting, though, part of this is that the technology for the system would eventually help create America Online, which is likely your favorite drink coaster after you got your 53rd free copy of the CD in the mail.
You've got mail.
So, the interesting part, though, is that there's a gap between that, right? So 83, granted, it was a service for a while, probably 4 years, I think, up until 87. But the point was that with the introduction of bigger games, online game catalogs became harder and harder to provide players with that service because it would just take too long to download the games. So, if you're looking at Nintendo games and Sega Genesis games, they're just far too large, right? You're talking megabytes of data versus something that could only give you 1.2 kilobits per second. So not exactly the best. But in 1990, Sega started a thing called the Sega MegaNet, which was the first online multiplayer system for console gamers. The unfortunate part about it is that it only lasted about a year. There was a really limited library of games that were downloadable. And out of those limited library, only a select few could be played competitively, but you could play online against someone else in Japan, as long as they had the service.
Only in Japan? It wasn't released in North America?
Nope, only in Japan. Actually, though, they released it in Brazil in 1995 as well. Random, but...
The Sega Genesis actually is still very popular in Brazil.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. And it is the Genesis there, Davey, if you're listening.
It's not the Mega Drive.
Now, if you skip ahead to 1994, where cable TV internet services were more widely available and some of the speeds in which they were using were much faster, they started using as well digital signals versus analog. And that spawned the very popular and very well-known Sega Channel.
Ah, I remember that.
Very similar to the way the game line and Play Cable, you plugged in your cable line into a special made Sega Genesis card to download games. The nice part is that it got a lot cheaper this time around. So for a one-time activation fee of $20, that included the price of the actual adapter as well. And $15 a month for users could access up to 50 games that would rotate on a monthly basis, which was kind of cool. I remember seeing a lot of advertisements for the Sega Channel. In fact, I have specific memories of them demoing it on like one of the off channels, like channel 12 where there was nothing on it. They had like a loop of somebody playing games. And that's actually where I first became familiar with Zombies Ate My Neighbors, was through that. So,
oh, nice.
Now, the problem with the Sega Channel is that some of the games had reduced content compared to their cartridge release because they couldn't bring all of it over,
right?
Because it just didn't fit on the adapter's memory. One example that was Super Street Fighter 2 could not bring that completely over, so it was kind of a watered down version of that. But with the Sega Channel, they made available certain games that had never been physically released in North America to North American gamers, such as Pulse Man, Mega Man: The Wily Wars, and Alien Soldiers. Alien Soldier is phenomenal, and it's a travesty that it wasn't released in North America. So the fact that it was playable by North American audiences is super cool. Now, the service at its peak had around 250,000 subscribers, but Sega planned to have over 1 million by the end of year one. Also, considering 1994 was kind of late in the console's life cycle, it's probably likely why it wasn't more popular. But technically, through the cable companies, 20 million people had access to the Sega Channel. But again, only 250,000 signed up.
Wow, wow.
Right. So the last one that we're going to talk about here is kind of one of my favorites. But around the same time the Sega Channel was debuting, another service became available for games that was an improvement to the MegaNet, known as the X-Band. So the X-Band,
the more common one known.
Yes. So the X-Band was the first competitive online gaming network. Now, you were able to use the MegaNet to connect with gamers, but this was a network. It wasn't just, to my knowledge from my research, it wasn't just you had to connect to a friend in order to play, like the old school kind of modem dial-up with PC, where this has a much more robust offering. So if you look at the X-Band, it was, of course, available for Sega and Nintendo, or Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. The actual device itself was sold at Blockbuster. Ironic that this thing didn't do well, but it was sold at Blockbuster. Who would have thought? But users would purchase the special card for basically $20, and it looked like a Game Genie. So you remember the like Game Shark and Game Genies that plugged into the Genesis and the Super Nintendo? looked very similar. So you plug that in first, and then you would plug the game that you wanted to play on top of that. So, of course, you would have to own these games in order to play it. There wasn't a downloadable market for it. But it essentially allowed you to kind of test your mettle, if you will, against other people. Because I remember as a kid thinking I was really, really good at certain games, and then growing up as an adult and seeing that I was not that good. Right? So this was a kind of a great way to do that. X-Band would attach to a phone line. At that time, DSL internet was really popular, so that was pretty easy to do and really easy to set up. But it wasn't just a way to connect with other players. They offered email services, newsletters, ranking boards, accumulated scores, and win-loss records for players. So there was a lot of extras in there that made, I think, the X-Band pretty darn cool. So, when connecting to play, unless you picked a specific user from your friends list, players would be matched at random with a player elsewhere in their country. Most of the time, what it tried to do was the player's local area code, because there was an extra cost if you did long distance calling, I guess.
Ooh, yep.
Right. Now, as anyone who was around back then would know, though, having a phone connected to the internet led to problems when someone would pick up the receiver or you got like an incoming call.
Right.
Right. While you couldn't prevent your mom from picking up the phone to call her best friend, they recommended users to get call waiting, because what the system would allow them to do is it would notify you when a call was coming in, and it would pause the game so the connection wasn't lost, which I think is, again, pretty cool.
Interesting.
Yeah. So even though this was kind of an awesome product that provided users with an experience that only PC gamers could play at the time, unfortunately enough, it wasn't really popular. And at its height, only had about 1,500 users.
Ouch.
Yeah, unfortunate, but I got to say, as a kid, if I had access to the X-Band, that would have been an amazing experience. It's like, I live in the future now. I can play people across the whole entire country if I wanted to in my favorite, Super Nintendo games. And in fact, most of them, if you look at the games, they're mostly either fighting games or sports games. So if you were into that at that time, this would have been perfect for most folks.
I think people back then were more interested in going outside and touching grass.
Yeah.
Going to arcades and things.
Actually, some of the research I put in there, they listed that as one of the potential problems, is that the arcade scene was so huge back then that people didn't really want to get out of the house, or didn't really want to stay in the house in order to play games against people.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
So kind of wrap things up, though, I think technology is a beautiful thing, and gamers have always kind of been on the forefront of using technology to game. And if you look at online gaming, has really opened up to a whole new avenue of competitive gaming. And to me, the advances that were created by all of these different items that we talked about is what's led to that experience. So I am completely happy about it. Just wish I got to do it back in the day.
Well said.
So thank you for attending today's lesson. Just a reminder, if you do have ideas for a story you'd like to hear, send us a message at gamersweekpodcast@gmail.com, and we might feature your suggestion.
I remember getting my butt beat for calling the Nintendo Power Hotline for help with the game. I can only imagine what would have happened if I would have gotten the X-Band or anything like that and had a subscription service and then getting charged 15 cents every time I wanted to play something or make a call to play somebody else across the globe.
Just reminds me of that European vacation scene where he's like, he said everything was going to be covered. And he goes, oh, not the phone bill. Well, we made some local calls. He's calculating it up. He's like, who called Chicago?
And you can see her. She goes out of seat. She's like, nope.
Your dad going, who gamed with Chicago?
Exactly. Who do you know in LA? You're only 10.
Sorry, Dad.
All right, we're going to wrap up this week's episode. Thank you for listening to episode 20 of Gamers Week Podcast, and a big thank you to the Retro Game Club Podcast, the Elitist Podcast, and Love Retro BTW for sponsoring this episode, as well as J&L Game for sponsoring our giveaway. Don't forget to check out their links in the show notes. And if you want to connect with Gamers Week, follow us on Twitter at GamersWeekPC, email us at gamersweekpodcast@gmail.com, visit our Visit our merch store at gamers-week-podcast.creator-spring.com, or if you want to do it the easy way, follow the link in the show notes. And last but not least, join us on Patreon at patreon.com/gamersweek. Finally, since you made it all the way to the end of this episode, please leave us a rating and review to let us know how we did. We really do value your feedback. While you're there, consider subscribing on iTunes, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice.
And you saying Moich made me think it sounded like a Brooklyn accent, like visit a Moich store at Gamers Week Podcast, creatorspring.com. Or if you want to, it's the easy way, follow the links in the show notes.
You won't forget it, okay?
Coffee and talk.
I'm verklempt. Talk amongst yourselves.
Duran is neither Duran nor Duran. Discuss.
Def Leppard is not deaf. They can hear just fine.
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye.
We'll see you next week.
Coffee and talk.